Hello everyone, it's Chris here. And I've got Tiger here with me as well. He's sitting in the chair outside. So he might want some attention during the video. I'm close to my cats. Really love my cats. It's a bit weird. But anyway, today I want to speak about a book called Safety Net, which is written under my own name. Been a few years since I wrote the book, but I felt there's a need for such a book because, especially if you live in a dangerous place like South Africa or you're in some place in the world, and it can happen anywhere, it can really happen anywhere, where you feel you might be in danger from criminals. Now, this does not really deal with a terrorist attack. A terrorist attack is something else, and I will explain it a bit later. I even made a whole bunch of notes, cheat notes, I suppose. But anyway, there is a book called Terrorist Takedown as well, where you specifically deal with a terrorist attack. I mean, let's say you're in a mall somewhere, let's say you're carrying a firearm, or perhaps not, and you can get hold of a firearm, or perhaps not. But anyway, what should you do? What shouldn't you do? What should you look for? We go into great detail there. But that book, Terrorist Takedown, was almost not published because, would you believe, it was Amazon or somebody who had a problem with a name. Apparently, it is not kosher to talk about terrorist takedown, to take a terrorist down, which is an American slang. I mean, we'll just say we shoot them over. You know what I mean? But you know what? People are a bit strange. As I said to you in the other books where we found him, we actually changed the manuscript to make Barack Obama look better. That was codename Belladonna, I think. It's amazing. It's amazing what these people behind their computers gets up to. Because they have a power and they think they can get away with it, and mostly they do. Actually, that's the other thing. Okay, if I'm a bit sweaty, man, it's a monsoon out here, so it's extremely humid. I put the aircon on and it will take about 2-3 minutes before it's really working, even though it's really good aircon. But I had to run up here to a third floor to do this recording quickly, and it's warm. It's warm outside, but I'm sure I won't bother you too much. Let's talk about this book, which is Safety Net. It's available, let me first say to you, at Amazon in Kindle as well as in hardcover, softcover, I believe, and also in audio these days. It's this artificial audio, AI audio. That's all I can afford, man. It's for free. I really don't have the money or the inclination to get the money to get some actor who's actually, get into the swing of things. Yeah, I know that's fantastic, but we have to be realistic. I've got dozens of books. If I have to pay every guy, between 5 and 10,000 rands, it's $500,000 which I have to put up. It's not possible. But I wrote this book to help. I wrote this book to assist people, to get the message out that there's a lot of things we saw in the police. For 6 years I spent in the police, and thereafter also as an attorney, funny enough, and in the shadows, of course. There's a lot of things we saw, and there's a lot of things which we realized we can do better. So this book is all about spreading knowledge, and we did save a lot of people across the world. I'm very proud of it. It's sad to me that in South Africa itself, it's like when you did that, when I did that thing on hostage survival, which is also in terrorist takedown, but I'll speak about terrorist takedown in a different video. You would think that people actually want to know what to do in an emergency, but most people are actually like ostriches. They just don't want to know. They hope and pray that it never happens to them, so they're not prepared. And so they die. Yeah. Sadly so. Sadly so, because with a little bit of knowledge, you could have saved your life. You could have saved the life of your family, of your loved ones, if you know how to treat trauma. And I think we're going to make on Legacy Conversations. We actually have a video made by SV Foré, our friendly Sergeant Major of 1 Reconnaissance Regiment. as well as a 7 medical battalion member. And both of them are rated special forces, for you who don't know. And legacy conversations, again, guys, I know many of you know me already. It's fascinating to me how many of you write to me or talk to me and say, Chris, we know you. Yeah, you see me on your TV or in your screen, but it gets time to get to know me, you know. But you're welcome to get to know me. If you're ever in Phuket, guys, just come along, man. You can sit here next to me and record. I'll always make time for you to sit down with you over a cup of tea, uh, coffee if you really want. No alcohol. Don't allow alcohol in our place. But I'm always willing and open to speak to people. I like doing it, actually. Because you learn from people, you know. You should never be that arrogant to think you cannot learn. That's when you're on the wrong track, man. That's when you're wrong. But to make a long story short, we did make a video. It was never broadcasted. It was actually came out only on Patreons, simply because I felt there were certain promises made in the video about assistance, but the people who made the video never actually got the money to do that. So their hearts were in the right place, but the video might have been a bit premature. But it's still a fascinating video because it describes how many people actually die when they bleed to death. So the thing is called Stop the Blood. And that's exactly what it is. But I might do another one. I was thinking of getting the 7 big people in and then do it on Legacy. I might even post this video on Legacy as well, because I feel this is to help people, you know. If we can save a life, as our friend Dr. Eric Solomon said to me once in his episodes, if you save a life, you save a world. It's all Jewish thing to say that, and it's very true today as well. So this you have to spread around. If you feel there's somebody who might have need for this information or this book, then spread it around. So the first thing we did is we looked at layered defense systems. Then we looked at insurance-driven security. Now I will go through each individually, just a short, because it is a 300-page book, I think, or quite substantial, but you have to read it. It actually reads very easily, and there's also a lot of pictures in it. And then the third chapter is about awareness and the JKLS system. Now that's important because the JKLS system is something I designed with the help from above, not me. All glory to God, you know. But it did save a lot of lives already. And then we look at specific threats and specific security measures. And we also look at rural versus urban, because it's different on your farm or small holding than it would be in, in your house in the suburbs. And we might even have make a video on that too, to assist the farmers, but we'll see. We'll see. I'll talk about that. And then safe rooms, or but some people call it safe houses, but that's totally a different thing. Talk about a safe room is it's just a place you can hide for a little bit. We'll talk about that, and then the crime scenes and the media. And lastly, we talk about faith. And I quote, I think, somebody from the Rhodesian army, black guy, who interrogated a few terrorists who were attacking farms. And this is well known, but apparently these terrorists went to a farm and they didn't attack it. And the police could see this. They could see the tracks. They could see where they were placing their mortars and machine guns, and they wanted to attack, and then they just left. And they attacked the farm next door. Now, the Rhodesians had something very clever going. They're smart people. I write about it in other books as well. I think in the Mean Streets Police series, Weten was the Strate. You know, the police books, the ones about my career in the police, it wasn't that great. But I'm sure it's fascinating to a lot of people because, you see the policeman driving past, you don't really know what's going on in his head. And we were fighting everywhere, man. We were fighting in riots and counterinsurgency, and then there's the criminals, and then there were the courts, the legal system. Yeah. But in this case, in Rhodesia, the terrorists, and they could be traced because Rhodesians would treat a terrorist attack like a crime. So they would take ballistic um, investigations on every attack. So they would know that a certain AK-47 or rifle was used to attack that farm, this farm, that farm, and then they could trace the terrorist gangs like that. Something we never did, and then that was a bit silly. We should have done it. And I'm sure we would have done it if the war didn't stop and it became worse in the rural area in South Africa. I think we would have implemented that system as well. And it's deadly because you interrogate a terrorist, which, of course, as I always say to you, one man's terrorist is, of course, another man's freedom fighter, right? But I'm speaking from the viewpoint where I'm coming from and in those years, so don't take offense. It's the same on Legacy Conversations where the big channel, the main channel, the one with the millions of views, where we speak to military veterans, South African, Rhodesian. Here and there, if you have a South African or Israeli, you're also welcome. Come and tell your story. But there we talk, from our viewpoint. And our viewpoint is these people terrorists. In top story. From their viewpoint, we were the terrorists and the oppressors and whatever. Depends on where you come from. But anyway, this Rhodesian army sergeant then testified and he said, look, they were interrogating these people, probably with the police or whatever. But anyway, so this terrorist said, no, they went to attack this farm. And as they were setting up their mortars and everything to do it, they saw these huge, which he says is angels. He says it wasn't from earth. It was definitely heavenly. It was not evil. It was dressed in white. And they were standing around there, and there were a lot of it. That's when they decided, no, we don't think we're going to attack this place. We will rather go to the other way. Now, not all terrorists, of course, were communists in the sense that they didn't believe in God. Many of them do. Many of them did. We found Bibles from the dead. Those we actually sat down and spoke to them during interrogations, which is not always violent. I mean, not really. It's more it can take months. It's more a psychological game. If you listen to what people spoke about on Legacy, I think of Colonel Dolph Landman of a security branch, special branch of the South African Police Force, who is today, of course, everybody thinks these guys were real killers. In fact, they were not. There were a few who made mistakes and did things they shouldn't have, fighting fire with fire. But that was done on the instructions of the politicians, and frankly, they shouldn't have done it. And many of them went to jail. But, when you fight a war for many years, it is easy to go that route. It is also the difference between a police officer and an intelligence officer. Intelligence officer don't really have rules. Well, the police are bound to the laws of the country, and that is also a warning I must tell you here is don't take the law into your own hands. Especially not in a place like South Africa where you are really not. If you look like me, I don't think you will be treated with the same sympathy as the one you abused. Because the people investigating there does not look like you, the judges, the magistrates, almost everyone now, it does not look like you. Now, I'm not saying they're not doing their jobs. I'm not saying to you that they might be prejudiced, but yeah, we've seen it in court, of course, we've seen it. The evidence is out there. It shouldn't be there, but it is there. So don't break the law. You often find that when I started something called Forensic Law, that book is not published anymore. I think it was the memoirs of a rogue attorney, something I called it like that, but I decided not worth it. It's one of those books I wrote, which is, to me, not important. But there I started something called, which we called Forensic Law. It's got nothing to do with forensic investigations, as you see today. My idea was basically hijacked and stolen from me by the big companies. You know how it is. If you're a small one-man show, the major law firms and auditors, they just come and they steal your ideas. Of course, I'm sure they thought about it themselves. And let me rather say they were very peculiar, very, very peculiar similarities with my ideas and what they implemented, and they did it wrong as well. But there I've seen two things. I've seen that when you have a suspect and he's looking like you in the eyes like this, man, he'll take his glasses off and look at you straight in the eye. How's it going? How are you doing? You know, this type of thing. Oh, yeah, he's guilty. Yeah, he's guilty. He's trying to see what you're doing. He's trying to work out what you know. He's trying to play these mental games with you. Um, I know there's a lot of people who read body language. Then they say that some people are a bit suspect, their eyes flutter around. I don't mind those. Definitely, I had some nasty, nasty emails from people. I think when we did that conversation with Colonel Neil Ellis and Harris Kruxholder with Alouette, which he was talking about at Saxon World, that song National Museum of Military History in Johannesburg. Visit it if you can. Fantastic. But that guy was so upset with me. He said to me I scrolled the entire video for him because I was, my eyes were darting around. Yeah, it was. You know what, idiot? Let me explain something to you. Because we were recording at an open museum. They don't close it for us. They just give us permission to do it, and we're very grateful. So there's all these people walking around there. Some of them are standing and listening. They are actually quite nice. They respect that you are actually filming. The rest just don't give a finger shot. They don't care. Yeah, they don't care. So now you have like a child suddenly running in front of a camera, or these women coming and then she starts shouting for a child. They just don't give a single. You know what, I see it in Patong Beach as well. You can stand there filming with big cameras, the sunset, things like that. They'll walk right past. Funny enough, it's always the guys who think they are well built and they are muscled. They are the ones who also are Adonis's, very closely related to monkeys. No, not monkeys, chimpanzees. Yeah, they were the ones who would always walk past, want to show them. And then there's the females. Even you find very, very beautiful women here, to a penny actually. Way more considerate. They will always stop, look at you. Can I go past? Yes, ma'am. No problem. But at Saxon World, we had these problems. They would just walk past. I didn't give a. So I was looking around all the time, seeing who's doing what, who's going where, or giving the evil eye to the guy that's just, go away. Stop your nonsense. That's the one thing. The other thing which is pissed him off so much, this fellow, I banned him, by the way. Don't have time for nonsense. Is he was complaining bitterly because I was looking at my cell phone now and then. Yeah, idiot. That's where I actually wrote all my questions in. So, these things are not rehearsed. You're standing there, you're recording because Colonel Ellis has a life. He has to go somewhere else. You can only record that long because the camera will only record 29 minutes because it's bought in Swineland, Switzerland. Because of European Union rules, which they of course are not part of, but they follow them slavely. They're neutral. But they're not neutral. Actually not neutral at all. As yesterday I made a video where I described a bit how really unneutral they are. And there's also in the When and Where books where we look at the neutrality of Swineland, Switzerland, and there's nothing neutral about that country at all. It's totally Western orientated. European Union. They lost their status as a neutral country, actually, because of that. They haven't realized it yet, but the rest of the world did, thank God. But there, when you buy a camera there, you can only record 29 minutes and 59 seconds, because the European rules are, if this camera can record 30 minutes, 30 minutes, then it's a movie camera, and then they add a huge price on it. So what people like Canon and the rest did is they just limited it to 29 minutes and you have to go and press record again. So it's got nothing to do with storage. It's got to do with European idiot rules. So you will be looking at your watch as well. In fact, that's why you see me in many of the videos I have like a diving watch on. And then I would put the diving bezel, and you would just put it where you start. So you can see in a glance, okay, we've been speaking 22 minutes. Right, guys, we have to end this now and then start afresh. But people don't know that, so they just jump on the bandwagon, and then of course things don't go well. But anyway, to make a long story short, I also want to tell you what's the difference between a terrorist and a criminal. Now, what I've seen is, and I speak with great authority here because I've seen a lot of both. is that the terrorist is normally not insane. There's nothing wrong with him from a mental side. He might be doing things which you consider to be, insanity, but he's normally not like that, and they don't really want to recruit people who's insane. If they recruit such people, they normally set them up as suicide bombers, just to get rid of him. They don't want that type of person because it is a semi-military thing, which means that he needs to be able to follow orders. And if he can't follow orders, they don't want him. Logical. While a criminal might actually be a screw or two loose. I once stood at a crime scene and this guy murdered a whole bunch of people, and I asked him, why did you do it? Because it doesn't look like a murderer, most people don't. Very ordinary looking, actually. Especially the rapist. Most of them are not good looking people, but anyway. So they just said, no, um, I heard the song in my head and I decided I'm going to do it. Something told me to do it. Yeah, it is possible. There are people who actually do suffer from mental issues and they commit acts like that. And there's others who are cold-blooded. The French, of course, talk about a crime of passion. You walk in and there's your girlfriend or your wife and she's very busy with your best friend or whoever, in a very, what is the learned people saying, fragranto delicto, you know. And if you react and you do something to him, the French are very understanding about such things. Our own law, and I don't practice law anymore, so I just have to tell you also it's in the books. I can't give you legal advice. I already said you don't break the law, whatever you do. But the major difference is between a terrorist and the criminal is the criminal normally wants to escape. Most of them don't actually want to be caught, no matter what you might think. Um, they 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 might shoot at you a few times and then they're on. The terrorist is different. The terrorist is going to wait until they get you and ambush and kill you. He's going to move forward like you would do when you were still in the army and you didn't carry a huge spook pens or a bit of a Tommy these days. You could move, man. You were hard, you were fast, and you were young. You could do it. These days we slow down, man. With this grey hair on us, there's a reason why we have grey hair. But anyway, to make a long story very short, is a terrorist will move in. He will try to kill you, and it depends on which organization. In South Africa in the old days, the MK people were very much more inclined to surrender, while APLA were not. APLA would try to make a stand. MK would also make a stand, but they would make their stand in court. They would many times lie on the oath to boost their own whatever they wanted to boost, their cause and things like that. It's amazing. That's why many of the trials were actually in camera, which oddly enough means that there's no journalist or other people around. It's just the witnesses, the judge. There's no jury system in South Africa, which is a good thing. And then also the lawyers, of course, they were as well, which in South Africa is either an advocate or an attorney, but mostly were advocates in those days because of where they were in the High Court, Supreme Court in those days. Anyway, so what I want to say to you is you will quickly realize what you're up to. Now, we do speak a little bit about farm attacks. In actual fact, we look at it in rural and urban security. Is it terrorism? There's no evidence which I could find which shows me it's terrorism in the sense of an attack against a civilian population with a political motive. People jump back to Rhodesia and how that worked, attack a farm, try to get the white people off, and then occupy the farm. I'm not sure that's what's happening in South Africa, and don't stone me. I know a lot of you feel very strongly otherwise. It can be argued both ways. But until I see that type of thing, I don't see the evidence. And I've spoken to many detectives, I've spoken to intelligence officers, and none of them think that this is anything but crime. And crime normally starts at home. But crime is a subject, of course, which a lot of people discuss in South Africa. So I want to to just show you some statistics which are in the books, because I looked at the USA and I looked at them against South Africa to see how they are acting and not acting. Okay, the statistics are 5 years old, so it's worse now. It seems like the US police departments, now there's a great many of them, of course, in the US, the so-called sheriff departments, they kill about three citizens every day. That's more than 1,000 a year. The UK bobbies on the beat, well, they kill about 6 people, including terrorists, a year. So there's a difference in violence, man. But I know, of course, you people now living in the UK will tell me that things are spiraling out of control. And I fully agree with you. I fully agree with you, especially with the online censoring. What you see here is Bible prophecies playing out. What you're seeing here is countries, Western countries, becoming fascist. In other words, they're going back to the Middle Ages. That's what's happening. Read Oath of Evil, the war on Protestantism. Yeah, I know I mention it in every single lecture. But it's very important. If you want to know why these things are happening and what's happening, and you want explanations on why would the US support terrorism, which they do, why are they killing those who oppose terrorism, which they do, all the evidence are there. Why were the Bibles changed? What's happening in the world? You have to read that book. And then, of course, you have to start researching like I did for many, many years. Because I don't say I have all the answers, but I do understand what's going on. And that's what's happening with the UK right now, the entire Western Europe, actually. In other words, the countries which used to call themselves Christian. Now, that's a subject for another day. But just to say that a place like Denmark and Switzerland, Swineland, it's very, very seldom for them to actually kill anybody, the police. They just don't. They're really not exposed to that type of thing, and that's why I look down on them, because for me it's like, man, you will not be able to deal with it. You cannot. A country like Switzerland, Swineland, I lived there for 3 years, so I speak out of experience. I describe this in many of the lectures. I actually observed their police, and they're superbly well equipped, of course. And they walk around there looking all stern and serious, and normally male and female. And they all walk like this, because they have all these equipment here on their waist. And I think if male, they should have completed their military camp, because it's not an army. Oh, shame. It's a camp. It's all it is. It's a summer camp for boys. That's what the Swiss military is. And I met a few of them. There was one guy who was trying to give us a parking ticket because Rebecca and myself were delivering things to the school, so we parked where we should have parked. And by the time we got back, which was minutes later, we just picked up something and put it in the school and came out. Here's this guy standing there. And Rebecca was actually speaking to him because I first went to the toilet. So when I arrived, she's speaking to him. So I walk up from behind. Now, let me tell you, there's no way in this world that you would have been able to walk up to me from behind and stand there looking at me, in a way which is not appreciated. Because I was studying him. I was thinking, okay, what arms does he have? What does he look? If I want to take him down, how will I do it? Blah, blah, blah. He was not even aware that I was there. He was just babbling there with Rebecca, who decided she's not going to accept the ticket. And so she was just telling him she's not going to do it. And so he was so involved with that, and they had no body there. And they don't use the body system anyway. Even though there's two of them, they have no flippant clue. They are tactically so far behind at times that you have to say, oh shame. In fact, you have to hope actually that one of them dies brutally, or a few of them, because that would they definitely up their standards. They would immediately then become more aware, which they're not. But on the other hand, I don't wish death upon anybody, so I'm just saying. And then I got involved and I said, I'm an ex-policeman. Can I ask you, how's your job? How are you doing? How many murders have you investigated? Oh, none. Serious crime? Oh, none. How long have you been in the force? About 15 years. Oh, my word. Oh, my word. Oh, You know, man, this is like a barrister in the UK. He wants to write a book. And this happened. He writes a book. He wants to write a book. He's 46 years old. He's done his first murder trial. Let me tell you, and this is not statistics to be proud of, but it shows the lack of experience, is that in South Africa, by the time you practice 5 years in law, you've done dozens of murder trials. There's nothing to it. There's really nothing to it. Which also shows that the police cannot be that ineffective if you have that many murder trials. So anyway, so I asked him at last, I could see he's going nowhere. So I was asking, okay, what firearm do you carry? I can see it's a Glock. I can see he has 2 magazines. I said, what firearm do you carry? He doesn't know. I said to him, how many bullets do you have? Doesn't know. Let me explain something to him and perhaps to you. If I ask a constable or anybody else, how many bullets do you have with you? You better be able to tell me, and you better be able to tell me how they were loaded in your magazines, and you better be able to tell me exactly how many you shot out, how many are left, and so forth. If you cannot do that, I will not allow you on my unit. I don't want you close to me, and I'll send you back for training, and you will definitely regret meeting me. Because these things are cardinal. You need to know. But they don't. It's the same when you're shooting. You count your shots. So you automatically work out, I have so many bullets left. How do you do it? A night shift, you will make the last 4 bullets in your magazine probably tracer. Let's say in the middle of the magazine, 2 tracers. Why? So I can know. There goes the tracers, right? I'm close to reloading, blah, blah, blah. Shoot and move. You know, they don't know any of these things. So yeah, you have to laugh at them. In my time in the 80s, the US police actually killed more people with their mag lights. Remember those big torches, those flashlights? They murdered more people to death with those things than what they shot. That's what they told us. I don't know if it's true. They're not really held accountable, this US police. They're not accountable at all. Between 2005 and 2019, they had 35 officers who were found guilty of any crime after killing somebody. That means they have a conviction rate of 0.25%. Yeah, in the land of a second beast where you ain't free, man, you can kill. If you're a policeman there, that's my deduction, is logical, is based on the statistics. You can go and murder people as much as you want. You're probably going to get away with it. For everyone which you see on the news, which is major news, of course, which is actually found guilty, you will find 1,000 who's not found guilty. So yeah, they get away with it. And with those who committed these offences where somebody died, over 35, only 3 of them were actually found guilty of murder in the first degree, which is a conviction rate of 0.021%. Yeah, you know, it's the Romans who said, we will defend us from our defenders. Yeah, I think it's Horak, one of our poets, said something like that. So your chance of getting away with this is 99%. So if you're a policeman in the US, by all means, well, let me put it differently. If you find yourself in the US, the second beast of the Bible these days, be very careful when you're dealing with the police because they are absolutely untrained. They have a tendency to get very violent without reason. They always have their firearms and shouting, show your hands and stand still, and I don't know what else. God knows why they even have a need to do that. Because when you arrive at a crime scene, you can very quickly understand whether you actually have a need to pull your firearm or not. In fact, in a place like South Africa in my days, to pull your firearm and pointing it at somebody was a crime. You can go to jail for that. But on the other hand, if you need to shoot in the police, you need to shoot very quickly, but you don't need to shoot 20 times. No, you don't. You actually only need to shoot for a few seconds and then a few bullets and that's it. But they don't know what is a double tap. They've got no idea what I mean when I talk about a double tap. We even have pictures of him where, his fancy dot sight thing is wrong side around. Yeah, and guess what? That's a SWAT team, man. It's also interesting that half of the time when they kill people, have a look at the news next time. This is very, very important. Half of the time when they kill people, they always have some type of a mental illness. They always come out of that story. This guy was looking for death, or he has a history of mental illness, blah, blah, blah. Then why not just arrest him? How many times have I gone to a complaint and a Tony is standing there and says, Sergeant, my son is not well and he's now acting up again. Can you guys just please fetch him and let's take him to a place of safety? And we walk in and we grab him and says, Kom seun. And he might, want to fight back a few slaps against the head and there we go. No need to kill him. No need to kill him. In fact, it's amazing. But you know what's even more amazing? Is in the South African police force where I come from, arrests were actually important. In other words, you were expected to make arrests. But not nonsense. You were expected to arrest people for serious crimes where needed. And in the US, they call that a felony, I believe. It's a more serious crime. Do you know that the US police, on average, make less than one felony arrest a year? Now, that means that either there's no crime there, it's very happy that's the case, but it ain't. Or it means they're just sitting there and they're not doing their job. It's simple. They're not doing their jobs. And then we also look at the different standards of training, which is, in fact, quite low. It's very low, in fact. I don't even want to talk about the SWAT teams. It's totally overused. You don't need a SWAT team to deliver a warrant. They just screw up. I wanted to use the F word, but people complain all the time. That's all they do. Go in. They like Mr. Man. They just shoot people dead. They get away with it. They break the doors. Oh, man, they're pathetic. But anyway, let's get back to South Africa. There was a thing called the Dr. Zinn report. It's a detective. He went and he spoke to the different criminals behind bars. This is 20 years ago at least. And he did his PhD then. And he asked him questions. He asked him, tell me, how did you commit this crime? Why did you do it? Just sat and talked to him. And I think Dr. Zinn still exists. I believe he's at UNISA. I would like to speak to him on legacy. But up to now, I couldn't get hold of him. And yes, of course, his report is quite old, but if you look at the internet, you will find it. I summarize it in this book because it's still very, very valid. It is still the way. It's still like that. Technology might have changed a little bit, but the crime itself hasn't changed. I mean, whether you stab Julius Caesar to death with a knife in the back, et tu, brute. The old story. It's murder, by the way. And in Latin, you didn't have a J, so it would be Julius. That's how you used to say his name. Now, he was a bit of a shyster himself, He made his money with his family by insurance. Would you believe? Then he got captured by some pirates, and there was a ransom. And that is where Julius Caesar decided he's going to take these people. And he became this famous general. Anyway, that's what they told us in Latin in my first year as a law student. Hik, hak, hok. We used to walk around there with saying all these things. Hik, hak, hok, and then you break a wind. Yeah, law students. But anyway, it is still very valid. So let's look what did Dr. Zinn find? In the first place, in South Africa, 8 out of 10 residential robberies are committed with help of information from within. In other words, your maids, your former employees, your gardener, all these people, they help. They help the criminals 8 out of 10 times. Now, what does that mean? That does not mean that they actually want to do it. They might be under pressure. Something have happened. But what I've seen is where the madam of a house is abused and raped and really worked over. Then there's a very good chance that she actually did something to the maid, or she was this. Some people are just bloody nasty. I found that those who are living in the richer areas are really nasty to their workers. And I don't mean all of you, please. I know I'm saying now, but generalizing. But what I've seen is there's no empathy. There's no empathy now, unless you've been very poor, and I've been very poor in my life, where you lost everything. You don't really have empathy for people who you know is suffering, and it comes out in your attitude. You don't think you can ever lose your money or your social status or whatever. You think you're untouchable. It gets to you. You drive a new car, you can drive fast, you can pay the fines, you are better than other people because you went to university. Yeah, I know you. I know you people. Not all of you, but be careful. Be careful. Karma is a bitch, as they say. But that also means that if it is so that 8 out of 10 people will be involved, it means that your contract with these people will have to be adjusted to say that should there be any incident, they have to go voluntarily for a lie detector test. Why? It's not evidence in court, but it makes the investigation easier. So you have to put that clause into your contract. You see, I was looking at this not only as a policeman, but also as a highly experienced attorney. I never lost a case in my life. And I never lost because I was totally prepared. Didn't like law, to be honest. I'm very glad I'm not there anymore and I'll never go back. But you need to put that in your contract. Then also it came out that they would be monitoring your place for about 2 weeks, which means, of course, you have to be on the guard. You have to look around. Who's standing here? What's this car is out here? Who's these people? Just wake up a bit. Don't just get in your car. You put your favorite music on or your show these days, through the internet, and now you're just in your own world. No, that's how you die. You have to be parat. You have to be aware. Uh, they also know these gangs, in today's gangs, it's seldom that you see one or two people attacking you. They also know exactly how your armed response works. In fact, many of them are fully aware how your alarm system works, your cameras, the response times, all those things. They know exactly how it works. And then most attacks, and this is fascinating, would occur between 7 at night till midnight. Why? Because you're there, you're relaxed, man. You got back from home, your wife is making the food, the children is there, I don't know what they're doing. But you're sitting around having a nice beer there, watching a rugby game or whatever. But your alarm systems are not on. There's your problem in life. Your alarm system should be on in a perimeter, at least, a perimeter around the house, even if not inside. So yeah, that's the answer to it. You see, what I did is I took a Zin report and I say, okay, if that is the case, we should do this. If this is the case, we should do this. In other words, we're countering. That's what makes the book interesting. And then 97% of these robbers are armed. They have firearms with them. Will the bastard shoot you? Yeah, there's no compulsion not to shoot you. On average, there's 4 of them. But as we've seen with car hijackings and cash in transit and those things, there's a lot more than 4. But there's more than 1. And 1 will also be outside to make sure to give a warning if a police or somebody arrives. So not all 4 of them will be inside the house. Then the average age of them is between 19 and 26 years old, which means that the new government has failed completely because many of them were born after the changes. But as you know, South Africa is what, 40% no jobs? I know that statistics is something else, the official ones, but yeah, it's sad. You drive down South Africa, and I was last there, it shocked me. It shocked me to see how far it went backwards. The grass is not cut on the pavements, the potholes everywhere. I'm talking Johannesburg now, not even the platteland. If I talk about the rural area, there's no roads even. It completely disappeared. And you see all of these men and even women, they're sitting there, they're just waiting for a job. I feel so sorry for them because, guys, I know how it feels. I know how it feels to be unable to find a job and you lose everything you have. And that's when you find out what's faith. And there's a lot of people going through this. And then you find these damn shysters. Now, there's a female Always with a woman. She applies for a job. She's very capable. She can do the job. But you've got a job, but you want something else. It's pathetic. I don't know what type of man would do that. It reminds me of Berlin. After 1945, the US people were stationed there, but the Brits as well. I write about this in some of my books, many books, I think, Voices, War Crimes, USA, where you could actually buy a woman for a teaspoon of jam or a teaspoon of sugar. Now, you would have thought if you're a victorious soldier and you're there and you have access to tin food, if you're a Christian man, or even a decent man, if you're not a Christian, then perhaps there's another creation of God in need. We're not enemies anymore. Yes, a bully, cannot bully. No, I don't need to sleep with you, man. Fraulein, it's okay. Let me take care of you. No. You want a bully? You need to open certain things. I call that rape, right? As much as you accuse the Soviet army of raping 1 million Berlin women, and they probably did, I'm telling you, if you've done that, you're nothing but a damn rapist. All you are. And you will pay the price one day when Jesus returns. Unless, of course, you repented. It's not for me to judge, but I'm telling you in your face, I think you're a rapist. But they did a lot more than that. In fact, about 790,000 German prisoners of war died after the war. Now, people say that figure is a bit high. It's based on a book which was written and confirmed by other people, where basically the POWs were not classified as POWs, but as something else, displaced persons or something, not exactly another word. And because of that, they were not POWs, even if they were kept in camps as POWs. The Red Cross couldn't gain access because they're not POWs, and there were no duty upon Eisenhower and the rest of the Allied command to feed these people, because the Geneva Convention say they must eat the same food as your own soldiers, and so they died. Yeah. Hundreds of thousands died of starvation after surrender. Man, if you don't know these things, you really have to read my books. You really have to see. I think I speak about it in Codename Alphabet 32 and other books as well. And it's also in the videos which I brought out before. You cannot take a man prisoner if you can't feed him. That's like keeping your dog in your garden, but you don't want to feed him, you don't want to play with him, you don't want to walk him, you don't want to. Why do you have a dog then? Why? You shouldn't have an animal if you're like that. Well, I remember how many times we found this and you would shoot the dog dead because it's better for him to die. And then you arrest the mobber who abused the dog or whatever animal. And yeah, those people can expect to be a bit paid in kind. They deserve it. Now, what's interesting is that 30% of these armed robbers have already committed murder or some other violent crime, which means that they will not hesitate. You're talking about people here who is definitely not church-going people. They will kill if they can. And 90% of them has not finished school. Hello, New South Africa again? Government? Why do these people leave school? It's not a female who got pregnant. No, this is a young man. He left school and now he's gone on a crime spree. And only 10% of them actually has finished school, and also 10% of them has actually given up a job to become a robber. Again, it's a failure, guys. This is a social failure from government side as well as from the population. This is what happens when there's no jobs. And I'm not making excuses for these people at all, but I'm telling you, there's reasons why they're doing this. And they're after the affluent people. In other words, if you wear a lot of jewelry or you live in a wealthy area, what they think is wealthy, you drive a flashy car. I once saw that there was a murder committed at Jacqueline's. Remember the disco there in Pretoria? Portuguese guy who was driving a 325 Cabriolet BMW. And he got shot dead. And we caught the guy, we arrested the guy, and I said, well, why did you shoot him? Why don't you just take his car? And he said to me, he was wearing this big gold chain and he has this big Rolex watch, and this brand new BMW, and then he looked at me in a way I didn't like, and so I killed him. So don't wear such jewelry and things, don't do that. And don't flush your money. Of course, the other myth is a lot of you will say, yeah, it's mostly white people who's attacked. No, actually not. The statistics show that all the races in South Africa are attacked. What is true, what is true is most of the attackers, 99.999% are black. You very seldom find white boys go out and do this. You just don't see it. So these guys commit about 103 robberies over 7 years before they get caught. And they don't live far from you. They're normally about 10 to 30 minutes drive away. Now that again takes away the idea of terrorism on farms. Most of the crimes committed there is locals. Either live in a township close by or they live on the farm or the farm next door. They are not strangers coming from overseas to come and kill you. But that, I suppose, have happened also. Then, sadly, that women are often tortured during these house robberies, especially, like I say, the maid is somehow angry and she's behind this. I absolutely assure you the female will be abused. When I do the lectures on hostage survival, I do talk about how to survive such a thing. I do mention it here in the book as well. I don't want to go out on air on it. There might be, I don't know, there's ways of mitigating such an act. Then the conviction rate for these house robbers are 7.67%. It's lower now. In the US, despite the US police, as I've told you, the statistics, their conviction rate is 53%. Which means in South Africa, court systems are not working. Your criminal justice system is gone. It's not working. Your 14% murder convictions is pathetic beyond belief, because that is where your best detectives, your experienced detectives with forensic evidence, everything gets involved. You should have almost 70% conviction rate. And to be honest, in the old days, in the old SAP murder and robbery, I think we're running at about 74% conviction rate. So it can be done. But sadly, in the new South Africa, with the new SAPS, which stands for SLAG, not really. I'm just pre-judgmental here because I'm from the force. But what I've seen of them, I'm not impressed at all. But it's for them to come and explain why these statistics are so pathetic. But then I must also tell you that, speaking now again as a former attorney, I can tell you that I don't think that the court system, in the sense of your state prosecutors, are trained. They have the degrees. They might have an LLB degree, which entitles them to put the word advocate behind their name. I can do it too. Why would I? Since I trained to be an attorney. But you can. But that doesn't make you clever. It just makes you booklet. Then you still need experience. Now, for the attorneys and the advocates in my day anyway, you had to do like a pupilship and apprenticeship. Your so-called articles. You're treated like a bloody slave. You're treated like horrible. You are not paid very, very little. You're abused. It is a shitty system. In fact, you learn nothing of it. I'm totally against it. But there's also something like law school, and there you learn a lot because it's practical, right? It's practical. And that's a thing where most professors at university at my time anyway totally failed because they had no practical experience. Yes, they've got their PhDs from Cambridge or from Oxford or a few ones from Wits and so forth. And so they're clever people. They're academic people, but they have no clue how to go to court. Some of them were judges at a small claims court. Let me roll my eyes, that means nothing. It takes time. It's like anything in the world. You need to go through that first few years and learn that experience. It's only when you have that experience you can come and talk people. and then teach them how to do it. But the universities don't do that. So we introduced a law school, which I went to. I think I went to a second one ever. And that really assisted. That's why I could pass my bar exam, side bar exam, in first go, which is something I'm quite proud of, because my ex-brother was smarter than me, according to himself. Yeah, it took him, I think, twice or three times to pass his exams, but he also came through a state prosecutor, state advocate route. You need that experience, and I don't think that prosecutors actually have that experience. That's where forensic law comes in. Forensic law, when you say what can a practicing attorney or a practicing advocate do for the victim of crime or some other injustice, turn the entire legal thing on its head. But you know what? I don't want to go into that now. I've been talking almost an hour, and this is just an introduction. I hope you're not bored. I hope you're still listening, because the interesting part actually starts now. But I will only say a few words on them, because each is now a chapter in the book. You can go and, study it if you wish. In the first place, you need a layered defense system. You can't just have, a silly little a camera here and an alarm there, and now you're done. No. You need to multi-layer. So you need to go and look, or get people who actually know what they're doing, to look at your place and then decide, okay, we need to work out a layered defense system. And part of that is being aware. And the other part of that is having a plan. Because if I have to tell you how many times I've heard a child say to me, well, I knew we were trouble, but I was too scared to press the panic alarm button, because my dad said he'll give me a hiding if I do, because if I press that button and the people come out and it was by a mistake, then it cost my dad money, and then he would, give me 6 of the best. Man, you're a bad parent. Let me say to you in your face, I said that to many. If a child thinks there's something wrong in that house, he needs to be trained to press that damn button. Don't hesitate with that, even if it costs you money, but it doesn't, unless you abuse it. The same way says, what happens if alarm does go off? What happens if your dog starts barking in a certain way? You need to understand your dogs. Funny thing which came out also in Zen is that criminals are scared of a little dog inside the house. They can't get past it. And they're also scared of things like online type of security, meaning that it doesn't record like in the old days to a video machine. They grab the entire video machine and they run away. No, they can't get to the one online. They don't like that, for obvious reasons. So you need to take a good look at the layered defense system. But the biggest problem I found in South Africa and other places are actually the insurance companies. Because the insurance company is the one who will dictate what your security will be. In other words, I'm not going to insure your car unless it's got a tracking device. Fair enough. I will not insure your car unless it's the gearbox is locked. You remember those silly things with the gearbox? Oh, God. It was such nonsense to open that and then they break it with a spade in 5 seconds. That type of thing. So they're trying to cover their asses, and for you to cover your asses, you need to walk right through your place, and you need to make sure that you have everything listed to the insurance company. Because afterwards, they will definitely not take your word. I recall being robbed myself, and I bought a Technique Hi-Fi when I came back from a border in 89, I think. Very proud of my Hi-Fi. This was now 15 years later, I suppose. And they swiped my Techniques. And so this insurance assessor or whatever, God bless him too, he arrives and he's sitting there, and I can see he's not believing me. He's sitting there and says, okay, can you prove you had Techniques Hi-Fi? Yeah, here's the papers. See, here's the manuals. So I learned a lesson that day. They're going to screw you as much as they can. And I don't care if insurance companies here are saying, no, that's not true. Of course it's true. Don't lie to me. You know it's true. And you will screw them if you can, because you're getting screwed by people who have been screwed. And now they add more things to get their money back from the previous time. If you see, this is a very bad circle. It's really bad. Well, I can hear the rain falling outside. It's really, really raining here. So to make a long story short, make sure that you list everything, especially if it's valuable. And remember, because your wedding ring is valuable to you, it's not to say it's valuable to anybody else. They're only going to look at how much gold is in this thing. Is it 18 karat? Is it 9 karat? Is it a real diamond? Blah, blah, blah. That's what they look at. What you're looking for. They don't care if, yeah, well, I had it for 40 years now and I bought it with money which I came back from the border or whatever. No, don't care. So you need to get your things inside your house. You need to sort that out. But the biggest problem with the insurance-driven security is they will say to you, okay, for me to insure you, you need an alarm system. Okay, so you call the alarm guys, they arrive, they sell you this most basic piece of crap you can get. You have little eyes here and there, you have a panic pattern, you have a beam, and whatever that's what you have. Okay, this is standard. Now you're fulfilled to your insurance contract will now pay out. But does that keep you safe? The answer is no. No, because you have not fulfilled the measured, the layered defense system which we spoke about just now. You need more than the standard thing. For the alarm company, this is like selling a cell phone. In other words, I will even give it to you for free as long as you pay me per month. Because that's my income. That's where I can then work out to pay my vehicles, my people, blah, blah, blah. If I got 100,000 of you, blah, blah, blah. Actually, I think we security companies are failing their clients badly, very badly, because they don't really explain to them what I'm explaining to you now. Perhaps I don't have time, but I've been speaking to them, and I said to them, guys, why don't you just reach out to the community? Say to them, we'll have an open day. Come and talk to us. This is what we've seen. This is how we solve this, and this is what you can improve. A stupid thing. Put a number on your wall. So that the police, who probably don't have GPS, but these days they might have, that they can actually find your building or your place, that type of thing. Plant a tree in front of your window, which have burger bars, yeah, that's true. But just plant a tall tree there, something which will hurt the guy. There's many, many things you can do to make life hard for this bastard. They'd rather go to their house next door. But they don't do that. They don't do that at all. Then you have what we call the chapter 3, awareness. I don't want to say much about awareness. I said it already. You need to be able to look around you. And, madam, lock your damn car. I don't know why you people don't lock your cars. It's amazing to me. I sit there at the robots, the traffic lights, and I look around and I see, here's this girl sitting there talking on her cell phone. Her windows are not armored in the sense there's none of these smash and grabs on it. She's just sitting there chatting away to her boyfriend or whatever. All the 4 doors in the cars are open. All that the guy needs to do is open the door at the back, sit behind her, put that knife right here on her neck, and say, let's go. Now, madam, what now? What now? You see my point? Just lock your damn car. Get these smash and grab windows. We also speak about in the book, I say to you, if you buy the old 7 Series BMW, the ones before the Bengal rubbish, most of them were armored. You can get an armored vehicle very, very cheaply indeed. And it's old. Nobody wants it, but it's still luxury. Still got aircon and everything. Might be heavy on fuel. So what? But, I had one. I was driving the 7 Series armored vehicle at some stage. And it's really nice. You sit there in the middle of the night at a traffic light and you think, what you going to do, Mr. Criminal? What you going to do? But then you also need to be trained on how to use your vehicle as a weapon. But anyway, we speak about that in the books. I want to talk to you quickly about JKLS system. Now, your problem is if the police arrive there or the emergency people arrive there and they don't know who you are, and they don't know what illnesses you have, and they don't know what medical treatment you have, and they don't know your wife, they don't know how many people are in the house. They don't know. And you might be unconscious or dead. And it might be that your child has been hiding in a cupboard. It might be that they actually took your child away to make beauty of him. Yeah, that happens too in Africa, They steal a white child and they kill him. They take his organs out while he's still alive. because we use those organs then to make muti. We call muti is like a witch doctor type of thing. That happens. Yeah. So what you need to do is and it's in the book, there's examples of how to do it. You need to make a list, say in the main bedroom, picture of yourself, picture of your wife, and just explain basically, this is who you are, this is your medical aid, if you have, this is your doctor, if you have, with their details, in case of emergency. Ask that person before you do that, but make it your case of emergency. Here's your health history. Make it in big letters. Don't make fancy fonts. What you want is a medic to look up, saying, well, okay, I see this one is 67 years old. He's had a heart bypass. He's on whatever medicine. Bingo, I can treat him. Otherwise, guys, you might die. Really, you might die. This has saved many, many lives across the world. And now when people, of course, come to me and say, yeah, but because, these criminals, even if they don't have a school leaver certificate, they can read. So now you give him all the evidence, they keep you there. And you know what, because now I look at the cupboard, I see, yes, the picture with you and your wife and your kiddies. And yes, now I have all the details, Hello, did I not say to you that 80% of them have all the details before they even attack you? Did I not say that? Yes, they might read these things, but the chances are way greater that it's going to save your life. And that you will do inside your the kid's bedroom too. Like you put it like against in the cupboard. Right, Pity lives here. Pity is 11 years old. Pity is healthy. That's all you put there. When the police know, they say, right, there should be a Pity here. Where's this Pity? And then you start searching for the bodies. I've done that many times. So that's a JKLS system. This book is worth it just to implement that. And then we look at specific threats and specific security measures. I don't want to go into that. That's where we say, okay, let's look at a car hijacking. Let's look at armed robbery in your house. Let's look at this. Let's look at that. And there's specific ways you can counter it. And then we look at rural versus urban, which is also very fascinating. We might make a video on legacy on that. Because the rural one, the farm attacks are different. They're different, but in many ways they're also the same. But I don't want to go too much into that. In this episode, read the book, you'll find out that many of the farmers, I'm sad to say, are not parat, they're not aware. If something happened in the area, then of course they are very aware for quite a bit, and then it just lowers down again. It's human nature. But they do have systems in place, which is very good. And also remember here, guys, perhaps I should have said this in the front, but this is not where something happens where, the Zuma riots, which happened a few years ago, where you have entire Zulu nation almost coming for people in the towns. That is something else. That is where you have to look at people like Roland de Vries, Major General Roland de Vries. He's drafted some great plans, and we speak about it on legacy, on what to do, and these ideas to, as a community, to stand firm and to fight these people off. I fully agree with you. I think the plan to pack your bags and to move and get out to the Orange River is beyond ridiculous. You'll be killed on the way out. It's better to make a stand. And that's exactly what the guys did during those times. So, but this is not what I'm talking about. Yeah, I'm talking about individual criminals. I'm not talking about something like a mutiny of the army or whatever, you know what I mean? Like civil unrest. I'm talking here about normal crime, if there's such a thing. Then safe rooms. Now this is interesting because you can convert your bathroom into a safe room very, very quick. Now I know most of you have little doors, trellis doors and things which will cut off the rest of the house from the sleeping rooms. That's a very good thing. But if it's open like that, of course, the mobber can shoot you right through it, right? And what you don't do is you don't cover it to the ceiling. So what they do is they just make a hole in the ceiling and they go right through. Yeah, you have to think about these things a bit, and you have to train your people in the house. Something happens, everybody let's run towards the bathroom. Bathroom's got a reinforced door. there's water inside there. And of course, now you need to know also that you have like a medical kit there, that you also have like a camera system on the outside, see what's happening outside once everybody's in. A panic alarm button there. Normally it's hidden in the showers. I'm saying these things because the criminals know it as well. It's not that expensive to get a enforced door. Reinforced costs a few rand, but so what? Once you have a safe room in your house, a proper one. And remember, this is not a nuclear bunker. You're not supposed to stand there for weeks and weeks. This is only until the attack is gone, which doesn't last long. Then your house value, they tell me, goes up with about 10%. So you can afford to spend a bit of money on this. So we have an entire chapter looking at that. As I say, this is not a nuclear bunker or anything. This is just a place of safety. In other words, something happens, let's get into this room, lock that door, we monitor what's outside, we make sure they can't come through the ceiling, we have a little bit of food, everything there. You don't need to stay there long. It's only until the escape alarm, the alarm goes off and the people come and rescue you. Now you'll say to me, okay, but these criminals these days block out they cut the phone lines. They don't do that really anymore. They use jammers to jam your signals, things like that. Yeah, there's ways of getting past that. Using different frequencies, which I've never heard about, but you'll have to research it a little bit. But there are ways of getting past that. But most of the criminals don't do that. It's actually quite seldom that you hear that. So that's a safe room. I dedicate the entire chapter on it. It's very important. And then crime scenes and the media. Let's say despite all of this, they've taken something happened to you. Now there's a crime scene. Of course, there's always a crime scene, but I mean it in this way that perhaps you've been assaulted or whatever, or even, God forbid, raped. Things like that. There's a lot of things you can do to get back at them in the first place. Don't wash your body. Don't wash your clothes. Make sure that the forensic evidence is still there. And be very careful how you speak to the media, because the media, let me tell you, in the police, the first things you learned is you don't trust lawyers, any type, whether they advocates or attorneys. You just don't trust them. You don't speak to them. And you don't trust the media either, because they're all bloody well takara, they're all leftist, liberal, horrible things. You don't speak to them. No, you don't. No. You get your attorney or somebody you trust to speak on your behalf, because you might be in shock. You might be angry. You might say things you regret. And if it's a really violent thing, or it's a crime where there's a lot of publicity, yeah, these bastards will wrongly quote you. They will write an article. I've seen it so many times. That you look at it, you wonder, wow, what was at that crime scene? This is not what happened. This is not the least. And you know what? They might even be friendly to you. They might even be nice to you. They might even, show sympathy, things like that. No. Don't talk to journalists. We don't like journalists. Don't trust them. Don't trust them. Don't trust them at all. And the big thing to remember also here is, and goes back to forensic law, is that should you appoint a private detective? Now, there's very good private detectives out there. I've got many friends amongst them. Ex-police, they do fantastic work. But you also have a great many of them who's bunch of shysters. But the biggest problem with them is that they do not have any type of legal privilege. So what happens is, let me give you a scenario which you might understand better. Let's say that somebody has broken into your business and money has been stolen. Or you become aware that money has been stolen. So what you do now is you call the police. Police do the investigation. I find nothing. Or you say, okay, I tell you what, let me get a private investigator over. Because, it's a sad thing, but it might be my own son who's hooked on drugs, or might be one of my best workers who is stealing money or something. Might happen. Often happens. Then if that happens, you don't necessarily want the police involved. You don't. You want to keep us in the family. So if you appoint in a private detective and the private detective do the investigation, he says to you, okay, I'm sorry to say, but it's pity we've been working for you 15 years with doing this, got all the evidence. Then the question is what happens now? Because if private detective is called to court, he has to testify. So in other words, if there's a court case coming, he can't refuse to testify. He has to show the court what it is, and pity, who might be your boyfriend, I don't know. He's going to jail now. And that's not necessarily what you wanted. It's a child. You know what I mean? So the way to overcome that is you go to your attorney, and it must be a practicing attorney, not a legal advisor, which I've also been. Yeah, at Group 4 Security Corps, actually, in Nigeria. Lagos. Lagos. Yeah, we were based there for 2 years. Fascinating what was happening with that company in West Africa. Yeah, the good old days, huh? But anyway, to make a long story short, you don't have legal privilege unless you're a practicing attorney. So in other words, you have to go to your attorney and through him appoint a private detective, which means that the private detective then cannot blackmail you because some will. I've seen that too. For whatever reason, they might even think they're doing you a favor because you're too soft on crime or whatever, but the end of the day is if you have legal privilege, he can't go to court. It's not going to help him. I've seen that in court actually, where a guy does an investigation on, let's say there's a marital dispute and there's a divorce now, and you need to know exactly how much money your client has and how much money his soon-to-be ex-wife has. So they do this forensic investigation. Now you get something called a forensic auditor. Now that is something you don't trust at all. He does not belong to the auditing board. So he's a total loose cannon. He can do what the hell he wants. It's not to say he's incompetent. He can do the job. But once again, if he's not appointed through your practicing attorney, he can then go like what happened to us. He just goes and he says, well, I don't think you guys paid me enough, so I just sold this information to your wife. Yeah, that happened to me. Man, it was embarrassing. So we had to stand up in court and we had to say, on behalf of my client, that yes, this instruction came through me as a practicing attorney. I claim privilege on that, so does my client, and therefore the evidence cannot be used in this court, and the judge agreed. And so they couldn't use that evidence, but it was stressful beyond belief. Ever seen a Jew boykie very angry, my client? Yeah, I'm sure that forensic auditor had something happening to him afterwards, and well deserved, if so. Not to say he did, but if he did, it was very well deserved. I hope he learned a lesson. So you don't trust them at all. It has to go through your practicing attorney so that you can keep it in-house and then deal with it. It's the same with forensic law. You will then, attach a pension or attach his car and get your money back. There's many ways of dealing with it. Locking the guy up should be the last resort. But I know a lot of you will say to me, don't be soft on crime, blah, blah, blah. Depends what your client wants. If your client just wants his money back and be left in peace, no problem. But if it is different, then it's different. Okay, so this is Safety Net. This is what Safety Net is about. I hope you enjoyed this. As I said, it's on Amazon. I don't think it's in South Africa. It's not worth my while to put all the books in South Africa on print on demand. But if you want to get hold of a book, I'm quite sure you can. Very reasonably priced. This can save your life. I've had instances where people write to me and say, I bought this book for my parents. They read it, they implemented the JKLS system, they implemented other things, it saved their lives. It makes me feel good when that happens, I'm really grateful. It's fantastic news. Okay, right. Let me go again. Like I say, it's a monsoon. We're damn busy here when it's monsoon. And we'll speak in the next one about another book. God bless.